Tuesday, February 25th, 2020, MONERO 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. So the PPT is so desperate that they had to intervene again after the market closed, because during market hours yesterday, their intervention failed for the stock market. They succeeded partly in the precious metals, but they had to come out in the after hours and intervene. And with that, I'm going to touch upon politics, and I'm going to reference this book, The Law, by Frederic Bastiat. He was an economist, libertarian from France in the first half of the 19th century. Very interesting book, and you'll see why I'm going to reference this. I don't touch upon politics much. I'm apolitical. I'm for small government. I don't like political parties, but I need to touch upon collectivism, because I see some people out there saying, oh, Bernie Sanders, he's going to be horrible for the US. He's a socialist. And I'm not a Bernie Sanders fan, as I've just said. I'm not into politics. And they say that as if right now we have free markets and we don't have any socialism or collectivism, because that's what socialism is. Collectivism, of course, is one group of people collect, loot, legalized plunder or loot, as Frederic Bastiat would say, from one group to themselves. So what kind of collectivism have we got now? Well, we've got the collectivism for, especially for the 1%. And I'm going to show you some charts from the Federal Reserve about wealth distribution and also assets and liabilities distribution in the United States. And so yesterday, after the market closed, I was following Twitter, and some people were noting that President Trump and his CNBC sidekick, who's now his economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, were saying that the stock market was a good buy, that you should buy the dip, everything's great. And lo and behold, the PPT has intervened in the aftermarket. So what is the PPT? Well, it's the Plunge Protection Team. They work together with the regulators, with the big banks. They have a U.S. Treasury fund that's worth probably hundreds of billions, probably the biggest hedge fund in the world. It was created with the money that FDR confiscated from Americans in 1933. The gold confiscation, they used part of that money to create this fund to regulate the markets for the top 1% or even the top 10%, but more for the top 1%. So what we have now is socialism for the top 1%, and it's sad to to see that a lot of those who back the incumbent president think that they have free markets and they have capitalism, but they don't. We have socialism for the 1% or collectivism. And so before I go into the charts about wealth distribution and the debt, that's very important, let's look at what the PPT has achieved overnight. First, let's look at what they did to precious metals. Yesterday, they came in after the COMEX regular hour close, the futures close, which in London is around 6:30. So you can see here from 7 p.m. London, which is 2 p.m. New York. I noticed gold started going down. It was hanging on around 1670 most of the afternoon in London. Yes, and that was while the stock market kept going down. So they're trying already there to keep gold from going back up to almost 1700. So they had to wait until the market closed and you had the after hour session. So they smashed gold down below 1660. And then gold overnight actually stayed pretty steady above 1650. And we've seen now that around 5 a.m. London, they came at gold again. And gold has been down as far as 1633. Right now, as I speak here, it's 7:54 a.m. London. Gold is back above 1640 at 1641.50. Am I concerned about this? No. I'd much rather hold physical gold than have my savings with the bankers. Yeah, so anyway, it's actually a good opportunity for those who haven't been able to get some precious metals to get it right now, in my opinion. So what about the overall market? Well, the overall market, I even tweeted yesterday, watch out for a Hail Mary rally at the end of the day. At the time, the Dow was down around 1,000, but we actually didn't get one. And I'm sure the powers that be tried to get it to rally. It's not good to have the Dow close 1,000 or more lower. I think even President Trump, someone copied a tweet from 2015 when he wasn't president. He said, a president that allows the Dow to drop over 1,000 points should be fired. That's what he said in 2015. Again, that shows the mentality. If we were in a free market and small government and not socialism for the 1%, why would a president of the United States need to worry so much about the stock market? He should just leave it to the market to decide where prices should be, right? And I'm really, it's really amazing how most people out there don't realize that. Yeah, no kind of collectivism or socialism is good because you're always taking from one group to the other. I don't think they're going to succeed. They're desperate, the PPT. They've had to intervene after the close in the futures market. And the Dow is up 220 points. I mean, that's not even a third of the drop. It hasn't even recovered a third of the drop from yesterday. Yesterday dropped 1,000, about, what was it percentage-wise? 3.5%. And right now it's up 0.8%. S&P the same. So I don't think they're going to succeed. These markets are going to go back down. I don't think it looks good. I guess it's the dead cat bounce that we're getting right now. I mean, I look at the headlines right now. Nothing seems to have changed in terms of the crisis that started out in China back in January. Well, publicly back in January. We don't know when it actually started. Zero Hedge is reporting here, 8,000 Californians under self-imposed quarantine. South Korea locks down city of 2.5 million people. Uncertainty surrounds fate of 2020 Tokyo Olympic Games. Disruption escalates. Procter & Gamble says over 17,000 products potentially impacted by the Chinese situation. And that's got to do with the global supply line just-in-time inventory, right? So things are still not great. I think there's still a lot of uncertainty. And yeah, that's all I think it is. It's the PPT and a desperate move to try to slow the market correction down. So yeah, I won't go through the rest of the market. Let's go through the book. And if you're wondering about the cap, this is an old one. Someone made it for me, MONERO 64 baseball cap or golf cap, whatever you're going to call it. And but now I've designed one very similar to this. It's in the MONERO 64 Teespring store. And don't forget that until March 15th, there's a 20% discount on all the merchandise there. So if you use the promo code WINTER2020, you'll get 20% off. And you can get one of these, or you can get one of my and the ECB mugs. I've got and the Fed mugs as well, and Billy's Silverbug mugs. Just have a look there. Anyway, The Law by Frederic Bastiat. So the classic blueprint for a just society. So let's read a little bit about Frederic Bastiat in the inside jacket here of the book. It says, The Law, Frederic Bastiat, and I quote, "It is impossible to introduce into society a greater change and a greater evil than this, the conversion of the law into an instrument of plunder." So that's the collectivism. Doesn't matter if you take from one group or the other, it's all legalized plunder, according to Frederic Bastiat. France of 1850 was in political turmoil. In the aftermath of the Revolution of 1848, the tide of socialism was sweeping the nation. One man stood alone against the tide. The precocious son of a merchant, Frederic Bastiat devoured the writings of free trade economists such as Adam Smith and Jean-Baptiste Say. Rejecting the popular notions of his day, Bastiat began to speak and write against ideas he believed were undermining natural harmonies of interest among men. First as an orator, an essayist, later as a member of the Legislative Assembly, he became known for withering logic and devastating wit. He also became isolated politically. The struggle between left and right was for power and plunder. So there you go. It hasn't changed, left to right. That's why it's pretty frustrating to see people who were supposedly libertarian now defending the right. Yet Bastiat believed that the only purpose of government was to guarantee individual rights and freedom. Individuals, not groups, not Wall Street, President Trump. You're not there to protect Wall Street or the 1%. The state, he declared, in perhaps his most memorable epigram, and I quote, "is that great fiction by which everyone tries to live at the expense of everyone else." So there you go. And that even applies to that story that Catherine Austin Fitts talks about pressing the red button. The red button would stop all the wars, all the drug trafficking, and most people wouldn't press that button because it would impact their bottom line, because that's what the state has become, an instrument of war and other things. Not only in the US, everywhere around the world. I'm not slagging off the US. This applies to most countries in the world, unfortunately, now. So with that, I want to show you some data to kind of prove my point about the wealth and the plunder from different groups to other groups. First, I'll show you the national debt in 1980, so 40 years ago. As you can see here, US debt clock was 866 billion. So yeah, that's where it was. And just look at where we're now. So a massive increase in the debt. So who's been lumbered with the debt? Is it the 1%? Is it the top 10%? No, it's the general public. To finish off, let's look at the wealth distribution data from the Federal Reserve. I'll put a link to this page below in the description. You can play around with it and look at it. You can see that I'm not like making this up. So if you look at 2019 now, which is the top chart, most of the corporate equities and mutual funds is owned by the top 10%. It's the brown bar. And if you look back 30 years ago, yes, they still own most of it, but it wasn't as much as it is now in relationship to the bottom 90% and the bottom 10%. Bottom 90% is the penultimate bar chart, and the bottom 10% is the last one. To finish off, let's look at assets and liabilities. You can see that the top 10%, which are the light green and the dark green. So the dark green is the top 1%. they own most of the assets here. From 50 to 90%, that's the yellow color. But look at the bottom 50%. That's the assets they own. It's it's very small compared even to the top 1%, right? So let's look at the liabilities, or who's carrying all the debt or most of the debt. You can see that it's the bottom 90%. The top 10% is carrying a very small proportion of the debt. And that's why I'm saying when the incumbent president keeps trying to soup up the stock market, keep asset prices high, he's not trying to help you, the general public. He's trying to help the top 10% and especially the top 1%, which is basically Wall Street. So there you go. It's going to be very interesting to keep an eye, of course, on the markets. As I said, it's going to get very volatile. And yeah, and I made a video, I think it was late last week. You need to hold on for dear life to your precious metals because it's the only way to protect your wealth. Yesterday, I do have a small trading account here in the UK. I don't have much money in there. Right now I'm using options, which is really great because of the volatility. But I closed out a position early yesterday before the US markets opened. I had some VIX calls that I bought last week and they did well and I closed it out. And then about half an hour later, the platform that I use froze and I couldn't go back into the trading platform and it froze for over an hour. So that's what you need to keep in mind if you're going to be trading out there. Be careful not to have too many eggs into that trading basket. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. Make sure you share it far and wide as well. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, think about subscribing. And you can also follow me on Twitter, Facebook, BitChute, DTube, and Steemit. I wish you all a great day. Take care. Bye.